In this episode, we're gonna go ahead and do our dry fit. So I've already put this together to make sure everything is coming together well. And everything looks really good right now. So it's a good idea to do the dry fit, make sure your dowels are not too long. And if they are, you can trim them down and make sure it all closes nice and tight. The other reason I wanna do this is that there's actually a few. One, we need to mark out the back of this divider. So the divider's in now. We can mark out exactly where it ends towards the back, which should be 3/4 of an inch stepped in. And that's to accommodate this back panel later on. So we need to rabbet that. So go ahead and mark that out, and that gives us a clear, indication of where we need to stop the rabbet so it comes, the back panel comes nice and flush to the back of the divider. The other, probably more important reason is this guy, so the hinge. It seems a little crazy that you have to think about the hinge now, even though we haven't got the door made, but you really do, especially for this type of hinge. So this is an offset knife hinge. It's a really nice hinge made from Brusso. It's a little bit tricky to use, so I'm going to show you how I do that. And I also want to point out that this is the hinge I'm using. Doesn't mean you have to use that hinge. You could use a couple of nice brass or whatever you want butt hinges, and that's going to work out just fine. When I teach it, I actually do the brass hinges, the butt hinges, because they're just a little bit easier to install. So we're going to lay this guy out, and then we can take this guy apart, take the divider out, put it back together just with the sides, and we're going to rabbet. So usually I put a clamp on it, and then I rabbet it with like a wing cutter, a rabbeting bit on my router table, and just work that bit up until I hit that pencil line that we laid out. Once that's done, then the whole thing can come apart again. We can lay out our holes for the shelves, drill them out on the drill press. Then we can shape the front edge and the two sides on the top and the bottom, get that real sweet, and then it's sand the heck out of everything. So make everything really nice inside, outside, and then we're ready to glue up. I don't think I'm forgetting anything. Once that's all done, yeah, then it's, ready to glue this up, and then we can move on with our back panel. So let's get into it. The first thing I want to start with is the hinge. I'm going to get that out of the way since it's more tricky. I did go ahead and make a little tester piece that represents my case. So this is my bottom and this is my side, and it's got the exact same offset. Now I went ahead and played with the edge detail, but I was mainly doing this to figure out where this hinge goes. So in the door, it's like so. And then it's going to look pretty much like that, and it's going to open all the way open, and it's a really nice minimal look to it, which that's why I'm using it. Now I will recommend go online and print out the specs, because the most important number here is actually this guy, so 0.553, and that's from the back edge to the center of the barrel. And that's very important, because when you lay out this hinge, you need to lay that out. That's from the face. So since we're going flush here, this is going to be flush to outside face. That measurement is from there back to this edge here. And what that means is basically the center of this barrel is going to be right on the line, the front line there. And that makes sure it pivots open and it has clearance, and it's not going to bind or get you into trouble. So got my test piece done, pretty happy with it. Now it's time to actually, lay out the real deal. My lighting here kind of sucks, so I apologize. But what I'm going to do for this is basically blue tape this off. I have a little piece of Formica somewhere that I've lost. Little piece of Formica that you put in here, and then you're going to push the hinge to it. And then I'm going to use my calipers to actually set the depth. Now that I have this hinge double stick taped in place, I can take the sides off, and it's just a lot easier for me to come in and cut my line on this edge and around. finish it off. Now that I've carefully laid it out with the blue tape, it gives me a real, big visual to know exactly where I need to route to. I'm just going to use my 3/8 inch upcut bit with a fence, and I'm just riding off this front edge. So I've clamped it down, and I'll go ahead and I'll do this line, the long part of the hinge first. Do it, bring this one over, do it, then change it and reference from the end. The benefit is that all these pieces are exactly the same length, so everything should line up perfectly. So let's just go ahead and get that done. Okay, so now I can chisel out these corners. You notice a little bit of burn. That's just because the bit I had is a little bit old and I was going really slow to make sure I didn't cut over the lines. I don't want to force it too much. So that looks really good. So we've got the case put back together without a divider, and we have our offset, our mark laid out. And so I'm basically using a rabbeting bit, and I've changed the bearings out, or the bearing out, so that it delivers a 3/8 inch wide, and then it's going to be 3/4, so 3/4 by 3/8 basically. So I'm just going to step it up. I'm probably going to take about an 1/8 inch, go all the way around, raise it up an 1/8 until we get, we're going to have a 3/8 this way and then 3/4 this way. And I'm going to do this on this table because it's a lot easier. Just work this around carefully. Okay, so that takes care of the back. It's not a very fun operation to do, but I find it a lot easier to do it this way than trying to do the rabbets on each individual ones and setting up a stop and start for the top and bottom. So that's what it looks like. After glue up, I usually go in and chisel that out. And the main thing is, a piece of 3/4 stock fits down there and looks nice and clean. And so that should work really well. Now we can take it apart. We need to do our shelf pin holes and then shape our edges. Sand everything and glue it up. Okay, so we have the holes drilled out for the shelf pins. You could make a jig for this. I just simply did some very careful layout and used a center find, little center punch, and just did that since there's not many of them. And you can lay it out however you want to. So we can push these to the side. These guys are ready to be sanded and finalized. And now it's moving on to the top. So before I sand the top faces out, I'm going to go ahead and do the edge profile because I'm going to scuff it up in the vise. This is probably the thing I enjoy doing the most, is treating the edges, especially the end grain. A really careful time here spent on the end grain. You can really make it a nice detail. Again, this is kind of up to you. You can leave it straight, you could bevel it, you could totally change this look to more of a shaker piece or kind of an arts and crafts piece or Scandinavian. It's just, how you treat these little edges. So what I'm going to do is something like this, just kind of a little bit of a finger, almost like a fingernail edge, but not quite, just a little bit of a radius. You could do this on the router table. I like doing it when I can by hand because it's just a little more organic and it doesn't look like it just came off a machine, meaning the shape doesn't. The finish is going to be very crisp and clean. Some of the tools I like to use, low angle block plane. Again, it's basically just a bunch of facets that we're going to create, and then we're going to blend it all in to be a nice smooth curve. And this gets you there really fast. So this is a little rasp type deal. I'm not going to say that name. Shinto? I don't know how to say that. But these things are really nice. It looks like a bunch of hacksaw blades. Works great. Another little rasp. spoke shave, little flat bottom spoke shave hair. And then I've got this little curved bottom one, which works really well. And then a little smoother, a smoothing plane. So this is to fair in the long curves to make sure it's not, you know, kind of snake-like. It's just nice and crisp and smooth when you run your eye down it. So those are the things that I'm going to use to create this. You're basically going to draw out a bunch of little lines. You just use your pencil, determine on what you need, and then write it up against the piece, or you could use a combination square. Yeah, have some fun with this. It doesn't have to be exactly like mine. So I'm going to get into it, get this done, and then it's over to my stroke sander to sand out the panels, because I have a stroke sander and it's a lot faster. All right. Finishing it out, sanding with some flat blocks. These prepping weapons work really well. And so really I'm still creating these little facets, but I'm trying to blend everything in. But the nice thing with this is on this top and bottom edge, you want to keep those pretty hard, because that's what your eye is going to pick up. So these work really well at keeping that established. And then you can blend it. And then the last thing I'll do, I'll go for the grits, and then I'll use some cardboard. Got everything sanded to 220, and now from that point I'll get a piece of cardboard, and this is what I mean. So it's just a thin piece of cardboard. I'm looking for some 220, but this will really help. Some 320. Anyhow, oh, I already have a piece. There we go. So 220. This little piece of cardboard just has enough rigidity to it that it will help you form, and you can kind of lift up off the edges a little bit and then use it like this, and it's going to just blend in any of those little facets, and it does a really nice job and still maintains a hard line at the base and at the top. Now that we have all our panels, inside, outside, all cleaned up, all our outside edges have been, eased, and everything's looking real sweet, I'm going to start taping off my parts. You just want to tape off where the joinery is since I sprayed. So I'm going to be spraying convergent varnish. All my parts are taken to 320, and that's far enough for convergent varnish. And I'll do one coat, sand that flat, and then do another coat, and it's done. The nice thing about it is once I go glue it up, it's completed, and it's not trying to spray or put finish inside of the cabinet afterwards, which can be a little tricky to do. The downside is you got to be careful when you clamp it up that you don't end up marring or scratching up your finish. So this is my go-to. It works really well. And I'm just going to continue doing kind of what I do, but you guys can definitely do an oil finish after the fact or even before. Okay, so there we have it, our carcass. Seems like a lot of work just to get, 5 pieces of wood glued up. But everything looks really nice. Like I mentioned and showed, I did pre-finish everything. Another benefit of that is, any glue squeeze out doesn't matter. You just pop it off later on. So it works really well when you can do it. You'll see when we get to doing the door in the back, I can't really do a pre-finish on a lot of that stuff. So next up for us is making the back. So we'll go ahead, start working on that, get the joinery and stuff done, and then it's onto the door, and this guy is going to be finished. So hope you enjoyed, and yeah, there it is, a box.